So this is a part that gets a little confusing, perhaps to you. I chose it despite that risk. Is that in this IDEO booklet, you'll find 15 tools depicted in these icons. We'll go through each of them in turn. Just a word of advice. You'll see a lot of repeat between the D-School publication and the IDEO publication. And merging them, I think, would be good for you. So you could use one or the other as your base, but look at both. And we're going to go through these tools very, very quickly. You'll have these slides for your reference. You'll also have the book at your reference. But I want to just give you an overview of the types of things we do to get inspiration. And this means it's an early inquiry. It's the early idea before you may even know the problem, right? You're starting to have a fuzzy idea that there is a problem. You don't know yet what it is, or certainly not what the solution. You don't know the problem. How can you know the solution? So this is an early and critical phase of design thinking. And that's why I think they chose the word inspiration. It probably means perspiration, but this is a very important process. So the first is frame your design challenge. So what is it that you're trying to accomplish? And these steps you see on the right side are steps that you go through. It even gives a time frame, in this case 90 minutes, to go through exploration of how do you frame the problem itself. And this would be absolutely applicable in the EY challenge and also in the HELP prize, right? Frame that challenge. What are you trying to accomplish? And there's some even forms where you can print those out, use those as a prompt for you to solicit ideas from each other and capture them. The second is create a project plan. This is just true for any project. Look at who's involved, who's doing what, when, get organized. And again, this is a moderately difficult 60-minute task, which is probably something you're quite familiar with because you work on projects and in teams all the time. But it's just good team hygiene if you want to create a clearly articulated project plan. Next is build a team. In this case, we're going to assign the team. So you won't have a choice of teammates, but if you were creating a group for innovation, you would want multidisciplinary, because if you're all thinking exactly the same way, you might as well just have one of you, right? So you want different types of thought processes, different skill sets, different perspectives, different opinions. And that's going to lead to more diversity of thought and ideas. So this is a key aspect of any high performing team, I believe, whether it's about innovation or anything that we do. Next is recruiting tools. Again, may or may not be as applicable in your project here, but in general, you may need or will need experts or people with knowledge from all walks of life, all different aspects. And so you need to find ways in order for you to attract them to join your project team. Secondary research. Although I've been touting the value of primary research, you need to get up to speed. And the quickest way to get up to speed is read everything you can about what's been published about this area so that you know what's been written and is the common thought out there. And on that basis, you can then add your own outcomes of your primary research. So this is an important step. It's really there for efficiency and for you to get the lay of the land, right? So you cannot skip this step. Interview. There are many flavors of interviews in the IDEO playbook, if you will. And this is one where it's one-on-one. So this set of guidelines and ideas is if you have a one-on-one interview. The second one is if you had a group interview where you're looking at a group of people, maybe like a focus group in nature, they have similar characteristics, and you're trying to elicit opinions from them as a group. So it gives you a way to conduct a group interview with forms and things like that. Then there's an expert interview. There may be an expert, there probably is an expert somewhere that's related to your topic. How do you approach and gather the information from an expert interview? So these are 3 specific sets of guidelines for different types of interviews depending on the setting. And then define your audience. So this is an important aspect as you're starting to narrow the range of possibilities of your product or your service. So you're defining your audience. In the HELP Prize, it's pretty broad, right? It's people in the world, 1 million people in the world. Well, that's not very defined at all. So you may need to narrow it. Say, I want to do sustainability for water, or I want to sustainability for carbon footprint, whatever it is. For EY, there are some things that are for client work or some for EY's future direction in next wave strategy. So these are all items that we would want to narrow as we start identifying what is it we want to tackle. Conversation starters, these are just ways that help kick off the discussion in interviews or just discussions with others, which is inevitable. Remember, one of the main things we do in this phase is talk to a lot of people because you're not expert, you're not affected, You may have no stakeholder position in any of this, and you want to get that. So these are conversation starters to start that dialogue for you to learn and listen and learn. Extremes and mainstreams. This is an idea where you could hit right down the middle and get the opinions, but that's what you're going to get. You get the safe answer, the most common answer. Sure, you want to know those, but you want to also get to the extremes. The extremes often tell you things that are valuable that may be ignored or not even understood by the mainstream. And yet they're important enough to make someone on one or the other extreme. So hear those out. You may or may not agree with them, but that's really not the point here. The point is, again, listening and learning on what are the extremes that are being encountered in this particular dilemma, whatever that dilemma might be. Next is immersion. And we talked about this briefly, but you immerse yourself in the communities physically, emotionally, mentally. I had a student years ago whose father was a minister, and he would bring people from his parish, and they dressed very plainly. They left all their watches and rings and wallets home, and they lived the homeless existence for a weekend. And they lived one night where there was difficulty with drug abuse. They lived another night where it was homeless because of circumstances. They lost their job. They couldn't pay the rent. They got kicked out of the home. So they are not kind of chronically homeless, and they have a path out, we hope, that they could refine their footing and get out of homelessness. Those are two entirely different experiences of homeless. And yet we say, oh, let's solve the homeless problem. Well, it's not one problem. So that's a great example of immersion. And those parishioners, when they were done with that, had a much better understanding of the complexity and the difficulty of addressing homelessness. So this is the type of thing that we talk about immersion. Analogous inspiration. We do this in business all the time. There's shorthands to explain something. It's the Airbnb of blank. It's the iPad of blank, right? These we do all the time, but it also may give us ideas of solutions. So here, the analogous is not just for explanation. It may tie one problem to a completely different problem, but has a different path that we're embarking on now. And we could borrow that path from another problem to solve our problem. So that's what this is. Can we research that as well? Card sort. This is just a physical means to give someone a deck of cards and have them sort the cards in order of priority or importance. And that's a way to deepen the results of your primary research, right? So it's a tool. I would say it's a tool within the interview process that helps prioritize and helps you understand what is the most important thing to address and what are the lesser things to address. Again, going into, you may not know. You may know there are 5 important features, but are all 5 necessary? Because one of the key things about innovation and entrepreneurs is when we do startups, we always talk about the MVP, the minimum viable product. And that is what solves the core issue. And you strip away all the fancy features and accoutrements, and you just want, what is the one piece of product? What is the prototype that solves the problem directly? And let's just make that. And let's not divert ourselves, take more time, take more investment, and allow a competitor to enter. Let's go straight for that MVP. So card sort is one way to start sorting out what should be in the MVP and what will not make the list of being a feature of the MVP. Draw it. This is just, we as humans can talk, but we should draw so that we can share and people can see better, right? Because if you have it in your mind, you can try to describe it, but if you draw it, you have a much higher likelihood that someone can follow your logic or the relationship or the pathway that you're envisioning. So draw it. It doesn't have to be beautiful. In fact, it's most powerful as a blank piece of paper and a pencil. You're drawing it real time so they can hear you describe it as it unfolds instead of seeing the entire product or system or process.